When describing the coming of the Lord, the Apostle Paul says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore encourage one another with these words." Elsewhere, in the book of Titus, Paul says that we are waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Therefore, for those who are ready, the return of Christ is something to really look forward to. We cannot know the exact day or hour of Jesus' return. Jesus says, "But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only." However, Jesus tells us that when certain events take place, we can know that he is just around a corner. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. When talking about his return, Jesus makes many references to prophecies that have already been foretold in Daniel. He even specifically mentions that one important sign of his return was spoken of by the prophet Daniel. Therefore, if Jesus thinks the book of Daniel is important for understanding the end times, then so should we. In recent history, many specific Daniel and Revelation prophecies have been fulfilled about the Antichrist kingdom and his rise to power. Professional theologians have been anticipating these for years, yet now these incredible prophecies have finally come to pass. Daniel 2 and 7 teach that there will be 4 empires that rise up in world history, one after another. In chapter 7, Daniel sees a vision of these 4 empires symbolized by 4 beasts that come up out of the Great Sea, which is a biblical term for the Mediterranean Sea. However, God defeats the 4th beast and sets up an eternal kingdom. Daniel 2 describes the same 4 kingdoms, but from a different angle. King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of a giant statue. The statue's body had 4 sections, each of which represents a different empire. Then a rock hits the feet of the statue, causing it to come tumbling down. The rock then grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. Daniel 2 identifies the first empire as Babylon. Daniel 5 tells us that the Medo-Persian Empire came after the Babylonian Empire. Furthermore, Daniel 8 also says that Greece came after the Medo-Persian Empire. This leaves the 4th empire, which came after Greece. This was none other than the Roman Empire. It was terrifying and violent, just like Daniel 7 describes. Furthermore, imagery of these 4 beasts in Daniel 7 match the historical descriptions of these 4 empires. The first beast in Daniel 7 is a lion that stands up and is given the mind of a man. This image symbolizes Babylon for 2 reasons. First, a lion was one of the main national symbols of Babylon. Second, because of his arrogance, God caused King Nebuchadnezzar to lose his mind. He went out and ate grass like an ox for 7 years. But once the 7 years were up, he stood up and his mind and his kingdom were restored to him. This symbolism of a lion standing up and receiving the mind of a man matches King Nebuchadnezzar perfectly. The same is true of the Medo-Persian Empire, which came after the Babylonian Empire. The vision depicts it as a bear that's raised up on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth. The Medo-Persian Empire was lopsided, with the Persian half being much bigger than the Medes half. Furthermore, the 3rd kingdom is represented by a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. Leopards are really fast, and would be even faster if they had 4 wings. This symbol accurately describes the speed at which Alexander the Great conquered the known world. The 4 heads of the leopard represent his 4 generals that took his place after he died. The 4th kingdom is not described as any specific animal. It is terrifying, ruthless, and violent, breaking everything to pieces. This matches what we know of the historical Roman Empire. It came after the Greek Empire, brutally conquering everyone into submission. Furthermore, it was much bigger than the first 3. Conservative theologians generally agree that the 4th beast represents the Roman Empire. Dr. John Walvoord, former president of Dallas Theological Seminary, states that conservative scholars with few exceptions generally identify the 4th beast as Rome. Furthermore, an article on the Ligonier Ministries website, which is a ministry of the late R.C. Sproul, states that it seems best to view the 4 successive beasts in Daniel 7:1-12 as corresponding to the same successive 4 empires imaged in the vision of the statue: Babylon, Media Persia, Greece, and Rome. However, Daniel 7 says that God violently destroys the final ruler of the Roman Empire when he sets up his eternal kingdom. After his defeat, all dominions will obey God and his people in his new kingdom. Daniel 7:27 says, "And the kingdom, and the dominion, and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him." But this poses a serious problem. The Roman Empire fell in 476 AD. It was not violently destroyed when God set up a global kingdom, where all dominions serve him. Did God's word fail? Let's take a closer look. Daniel 7 says, "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, and glory, and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed." Jesus uses the same wording to describe his second coming. In Matthew 24, Jesus says, "And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." The Roman Empire will be defeated by God at the second coming of Christ. In order for this to happen, it must be reborn in the end times. This is why Dr. John Walvoord anticipated the revival of the Roman Empire. Many well-known theologians teach that this is beginning to take place in the European Union. Some of these Bible teachers and pastors include David Jeremiah, Tony Evans, and the late Charles Ryrie. The European Union has many features of the end times Roman Empire. First, it was founded at the Treaty of Rome. It makes its own laws, has its own currency, and has its own legislature, the European Parliament. Furthermore, one former EU president even called the EU an empire. Second, the EU exists on the right place on the map. The historical Roman Empire covered territory in Western Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. However, the end times Roman Empire does not start off this large. The final ruler of the Roman Empire is called the Antichrist. Daniel 11:40-45 describe his military conquests. The Antichrist is attacked by Egypt, which is south of Israel. He is also attacked by a powerful force north of Israel. During his counterattack, the Antichrist sweeps through many countries. He eventually invades Israel. Then he goes on to take over Egypt and various parts of North Africa. But if the Antichrist goes to war with all of these places, then which part of the Roman Empire is he attacking from? By process of elimination, we can determine that his military base is in Western Europe. Third, the EU exists at the right time in history, alongside end-time Israel. Ezekiel 38-39 predict that the Jews will be regathered to Israel in the end times, after a very long exile. The Bible talks about this regathering when Ezekiel says, "Whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate." This was fulfilled in 1948 when Israel was reborn as a nation. Isaiah also talks about the rebirth of Israel when he says, "Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment? Yet no sooner is Zion in labor than she gives birth to her children." Daniel 2 also describes the fourth kingdom right before it is defeated by God's eternal kingdom. In chapter 2, the fourth kingdom has two phases. The historical Roman Empire is represented by legs of iron. The end times Roman Empire is represented by feet and toes of iron mixed with clay. According to Daniel 2, the end times Roman Empire has three features. As we will see, the European Union possesses all three characteristics. The European Union is a divided kingdom, just like Daniel 2:41 predicts. The first major example of this occurred from 2009 to 2013 with the Eurozone crisis. This threatened the very existence of the euro as a currency. Another strong example of the EU's disunity took place in 2016, where the UK voted to leave the EU in its historic Brexit vote. The European Union is also partly strong and partly brittle, just like verse 42 says. Some of the countries in the EU are militarily strong, others are militarily weak. Finally, Daniel 2:43 says that they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together. Marriages between people from different EU countries have a much higher rate of divorce than marriages between people in the same country. The end times Roman Empire is composed of a group of 10 kings. In Daniel 7, the fourth beast has 10 horns on its head. The angel explains this to Daniel, saying, "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise." Because of this, theologians anticipate a 10-nation alliance in the area where the Roman Empire was. Dr. John Walvoord anticipated the formation of the revived Roman Empire composed of a 10-nation confederacy. In 1995, a military alliance called the Western European Union became 10 member states. This alliance was a separate organization from the EU, but worked closely with it. Since the EU was not a military organization, EU members agreed to use the Western European Union as its defense component. The Bible uses the 10-horned beast to describe the context in which the Antichrist rises to power. Daniel 7:8 says, "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things." The angel interprets this vision for Daniel. Daniel 7:24 says, "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings." In 1998, document 666 proposed a new job title called the EU High Representative. In 1999, Javier Solana of Spain was appointed as the EU's first High Representative. He was also appointed as the Secretary General of the 10-nation Western European Union. Since Javier Solana was appointed after the original 10-nation alliance was in place and had less power than them, it strongly fits the image of a little horn rising up among 10 larger horns. Javier Solana was supposed to represent the EU to the rest of the world. The new job was supposed to be like a foreign minister or secretary of state, but without as much power. However, the E3, composed of France, the UK, and Germany, wanted to dictate EU foreign policy on their own. They were even accused of a power grab by other EU countries when they tried to hold their own special meeting to decide the EU's future. The E3 played a very big role in the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Initially, when meeting with the Iranians, they left Solana behind. Nevertheless, some countries complained about this, and Solana eventually accompanied them during the negotiations. On 06/06/06, Javier Solana emerged as leader of the group. He was shown on major news outlets presenting a deal that the Iranians could possibly accept. A major German newspaper puts it quite accurately. During his time in office, Solana established himself as a key negotiator and speaker for the EU on the subject of Iran's nuclear capabilities. If we look at Strong's Concordance, the literal meaning of put down is to be low. The short definition means that he humbled them. This can be backed up with other passages in the book of Daniel, which use the same word. Solana humbled the E3 by becoming their leader when they originally wanted to work without him. When describing the growth of the little horn, Pastor John MacArthur puts it this way, "But in the original text it is not nearly so violent. It actually refers to a gradual replacement as the new pushes out the old, and the old gradually fades away. It is not a catastrophe, it is progressive." Solana gradually replaced the E3 as the main speaker for the entire EU. This is very consistent with the image of the little horn which grows up and uproots 3 of the 10 horns. Revelation also talks about the beast with 10 horns. Revelation 17:12-13 says, "The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast." In 1999, at the Cologne European Council, EU leaders agreed to transfer the military functions of the 10-nation Western European Union to the European Union. Before this, the member countries of the WEU could go on military operations by pooling their forces together and deploying a special mission. Yet now, the 10-nation WEU is transferring these functions to the European Union. From now on, if they were going to do a joint military operation, they would do so through the European Union. As a result, the EU set up a new committee called the Political and Security Committee to oversee these new military operations. According to Solana, in other words, the EU took over the WEU functions. In 2000, Recommendation 666 proposed that Solana be made chairman of the Political and Security Committee. In this way, the WEU transferred their power and authority to do military operations to Javier Solana, just like Revelation says. However, Solana has since retired. But if he has really fulfilled these 3 prophecies, then he is destined to fulfill the rest. This is true regardless of his age. At 77, he is the same age as 3 U.S. presidential candidates: Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Michael Bloomberg. As we will see, Solana may be poised to fulfill 3 more prophecies about the Antichrist. Javier Solana has many of the personality traits of the Antichrist. Daniel 11:36 says, "He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all." Javier Solana has no traditional religion, since he is secular and an atheist. However, the passage goes on, saying that he does serve a god. Daniel 11:38 says, "He shall honor the god of fortresses instead of these. A god whom his fathers did not know he shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts." The passage just got done telling us that the Antichrist has no traditional religion. Therefore, theologians take the god of fortresses as a metaphor for military strength. Dr. John Walvoord says that he will worship only the power to make war and gain victory. Fortresses are for defending instead of attacking. Therefore, the Antichrist does not just worship military power, but military defense. On 06-1616, Solana gave a speech to the EU Parliament Subcommittee on Defense, arguing that the EU should become a military power. Back in 2015, he was so passionate about building a European defense union that he went on tour to the capitals of many European countries. He went to all this effort without any official EU position. When presenting his ideas in the EU's capital, he said, "I will put all of the energies that I have left to push forward this process." Here we have an atheist man saying that he will devote the rest of his life to the God of defense, as Daniel indicates. But how does he honor this God? He honors this God with gold and silver, and precious stones and costly gifts. In modern terms, this is money. The Antichrist is really big on defense spending. In June 2017, the European Union launched its first defense spending program. The European Defense Fund has numerous connections to the number 666 in official documents and other places. In the past, the number 666 has been strongly tied to Javier Solana or a prophecy he fulfills. Is God trying to tell us something? Will Javier Solana come back to lead the European Defense Fund? The Bible predicts that the Antichrist will make a 7-year contract with Israel and possibly many others. Daniel 9:27 says, "And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week." There are 4 features to this covenant. First, it is made by a future Roman ruler. We know this because the creator of the covenant is from the same group of people who would later destroy the temple, mentioned in verse 26. Second, it is made for 7 years. In this passage, 1 week is indisputably a week of years, based on context. Third, it is made with Israel. We know this because the entire prophecy is decreed for the Jews and Jerusalem. Finally, it will contain a promise of military protection for Israel. This last part isn't in Daniel 9, but we know it to be the case because of other passages, such as Isaiah 28:15. "Because you have said, 'We have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have an agreement. When the overwhelming whip passes through, it will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter.'" Many books and movies about the end times portray a European Antichrist making a 7-year peace treaty with Israel. This has also been widely anticipated by theologians and Bible scholars. Herbert Lockyer said in 1964, "And he, the Roman prince, head of the revived Roman Empire, shall confirm the covenant with many of the people of Israel for 1 week, 7 years." In 2002, Solana and a colleague proposed a new program to enhance relations with neighboring countries. As a result, in 2003, the EU's executive branch launched the European Neighborhood Policy. The program has several partner countries, a map of which looks curiously similar to a map of the old Roman Empire. Under the ENP, the European Union would pay member countries in exchange for their good behavior. Israel is an ENP member country. In 2006, the European Union passed the ENPI, which finances the European Neighborhood Policy for a period of 7 years, from 2007 to the end of 2013. After the first 7-year period was done, the European Union renewed the funding for the European Neighborhood Policy under the upgraded ENI. This finances the European Neighborhood Policy for another 7 years, from 2014 to the end of 2020. In the spring of 2018, the EU's executive branch proposed merging most EU foreign aid into one big mega fund. The NDICI will finance the European Neighborhood Policy and most other foreign aid from January 1st, 2021 to the end of 2027. Here we have the end times Roman Empire making a 7-year contract with Israel and many other countries. So what's missing? There is no promise of military protection. However, if led by Solana, would the EU be willing to provide military protection to its neighbors? Javier Solana would like the EU to use the military to become an autonomous security provider in its neighborhood. In another article, he said, "The EU, after all, will be defined by its actions, and peace and security are among the public goods that it must provide, both within and beyond its borders." But how might he enforce such a contract? The Bible predicts how the Antichrist's allies give him their national sovereignty, especially as it relates to their military power. Revelation 17:16-18 says, "And the 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose, and by giving their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God will be fulfilled. The woman whom you saw is the great city, which reigns over the kings of the earth." Verse 17 says that the 10 have a common purpose. This is in the context of the violent destruction of an end-time city called Babylon. Therefore, the common purpose is in the military domain. By 2009, the 10-nation WEU transferred all of its functions to the EU. As a result, they closed down in 2010. In the document dissolving the WEU, they listed a few reasons why. One reason was that the EU now had a common security and defense policy under its new treaty. Here we have a common policy, i.e. a common purpose, in the military domain. The Bible also states that the 10 will end up giving their kingdom to the beast. An examination of the Greek word for kingdom reveals that the 10 give their sovereignty to the Antichrist. Again, this power transfer is in the military domain because it involves the destruction of end times Babylon. When referring to EU member countries, Javier Solana said in 2016 that the deepening of CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy, could imply a loss in their autonomy of decision-making and, in some cases, a loss of sovereignty. Back in 2010, he said, "In Europe, countries have made voluntary transfers of sovereignty. Voluntary. No one has forced them. It is the first time in history where transfers of sovereignty are freely made." This sounds a lot like Revelation 17:17, where the 10 are giving their kingdom to the beast, which implies a voluntary transfer of sovereignty, just like Solana says. The Bible text demands that all 10 horns give their kingdom to the beast. As a result, all former members of the 10-nation WEU must do so. This includes the UK, even though they have already left the EU. In September 2017, the newly elected president of France proposed a European Intervention Initiative, or EI2. The goal of the EI2 is for member countries to work together on when and where to deploy troops throughout the world in crisis situations. As a result, 14 countries signed up to the new military intervention club, including the UK. Almost every former WEU country has joined or has been invited to join. The European Intervention Initiative could be the precursor to a defense treaty that EU countries signed with the UK after Brexit. If member countries agreed, this treaty could possibly assign a commander-in-chief to oversee deployments of European military forces. This would involve a loss of national sovereignty and defense. Solana would be a very qualified person to lead this group. Of course, Javier Solana would endorse a plan like this. In 2015, he said, "The EU needs to focus on a political and military ability to autonomously conduct intervention operations beyond the EU's borders." We've seen how Solana might fulfill 3 more prophecies about the Antichrist. First, he must lead the European Defense Fund, Daniel 11:38. Second, he must confirm a 7-year protection treaty with Israel, Daniel 9:27. Finally, he must command European military forces, Revelation 17:17. The most likely way he might do this would be to return to his old position of EU High Representative. This position would be even more powerful if it controlled these 3 new programs. This would fulfill Daniel 7, where the Antichrist starts off as a little horn, but later becomes greater than its companions. The High Representative is one of the cabinet members of the EU's executive branch, the European Commission. Each EU country gets to select someone to be on the cabinet. Once nominated, each cabinet member gets a different job. However, Spain was able to select one of their own to be the EU High Representative, as opposed to the other positions. This was a big win for Spain, because the High Representative is also one of the vice presidents in the cabinet, which means that they have other cabinet members report to them. Yet there is a small problem. Spain actually chose Josep Borrell to be the EU's High Representative. Borrell's confirmation as High Representative put a damper on the idea that another Spanish socialist, Javier Solana, would take the helm instead. Furthermore, the European Defense Fund wasn't placed under the supervision of the High Representative. Very illogically, Thierry Breton, who is in charge of the Defense Fund, and a lot of other stuff, reports to a different vice president. However, Spanish media repeatedly indicated that Borrell actually did not want the job because it requires too much travel. The Prime Minister of Spain kind of forced him into the position because of domestic political reasons. As a result, Borrell's original goal was to delegate more and travel less, but his heavy travel schedule on the EU's website seems to indicate otherwise. At age 72, this is a very valid concern. One newspaper even reported that European officials feared that he wouldn't even make it through half of his term. He is also known for making highly controversial comments which some groups consider offensive. Too much of this could lead to a scandal, wherein he might have to resign. If he were to resign for any reason, Spain would have to put forward another person for High Representative. As a result, Solana would be a very likely candidate to replace him. This is an entirely plausible outcome. The senior editor of a major EU newspaper, Euractiv.com, hoped that Borrell wouldn't pass his confirmation hearing before the EU Parliament. Before Borrell passed the hearing, the editor said, "Let's be optimistic and expect another great EU diplomat from Spain, such as Javier Solana." Solana seems to be interested in returning to politics. In October 2018, he retweeted someone who said that we would be in a better world if we had even one Solana active in world politics today. Furthermore, Solana already said that he wants to devote all of his remaining energies to European defense. Returning as EU High Representative would be the best way to do that. At 77 years old, he would be forced to appoint regional deputies. This would be consistent with what he and other prominent Europeans recommended for the High Representative back in July of 2019. Daniel 11:39 even implies that the Antichrist will have regional deputies at some point in his career. It says, "Those who acknowledge him he shall load with honor. He shall make them rulers over many and shall divide the land for a price." The High Representative already controls the EU's 7-year contract with Israel. Furthermore, Solana is a European defense expert. However, the people in charge of the defense fund are not defense experts. If Solana were to replace Borrell, then they might make the leader of the defense fund report to Solana for matters related to defense. This is very possible, as some cabinet members actually report to 2 vice presidents, depending on the work they are doing. Finally, the High Representative already leads EU military operations. Therefore, this person would be a natural candidate to lead any future European military intervention group. Solana's return would be overwhelming evidence that he is the Antichrist. Only God is capable of knowing who the next High Representative will be before European leaders even know it. If this is true, it must happen before January 1st, 2021, since that is the beginning of the EU's next 7-year treaty with Israel. Will Javier Solana replace Borrell to become the next EU High Representative?